to 8th Light Horse Regiment Commemoration Group wreath-laying ceremony here in a hallowed area of Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance. I'm Neil Smith, the Governor at the Shrine, and on behalf of the trustees, I welcome each and every one of you to this ceremony today. A little bit of administration, please. Do ensure that your mobile phones are switched off at this stage. Now, I'm asked to provide an acknowledgement of country to you, and I now do so. We recognise and embrace the diversity of our community and acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we honour Australian servicemen and women. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Now, personally, I consider my role as a host here today to be a great privilege. This is in view of my long personal interest in Australia's rich military heritage, in which the Victorian-raised 8th Light Horse Regiment played a prominent part in the bloody battles at the Neck and elsewhere on Gallipoli, and later the desert campaigns. Indeed, I was much involved in the research of Magar's Boys, which many of you would be familiar with, the book which shed light on each and every man of the regiment. Now, here at the Shrine, we consider it important that we remember especially the men from the 8th Light Horse Regiment who served and sacrificed in the horrors of the Great War 1914-1918. Now, I know that the team from the regiment's commemoration group and others have prepared something rather special for you today that will assist you to do just that. Now, I must remind you that this ceremony is being live streamed for those at home, so do be sure to check it out later and tell others who might be interested. Now, as I said, we've arranged something rather special for you today, and to my right we can see what that is in the form of 6 mounted light horsemen from the Creswick Light Horse Reenactment Group, complete with their steeds, representing soldiers, World War I light horse soldiers from both the 4th and the 8th Light Horse Regiment. Now, I have also been charged with being your Master of Ceremonies today, so at this point I would like to welcome to the speaker today, who will be Mr. Clint Richardson, who was a great uncle of one of the lads who actually charged at the Neck and fell with A Squadron of the 8th Light Horse Regiment on that fateful day in 1915. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Clint Richardson.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming along today. After the passing of time, then COVID getting in the way, we commemorated the 8th Light Horse Regiment last December by proudly unveiling and blessing this tree and plaque to honour our men of the 8th. And now today, on a day that became infamous in this nation's history, the 7th of August, the anniversary of the Battle of the Neck, we're here again. Before going on to tell you about our young men, firstly, I'd like to say some thank yous to the Shrine trustees, to our Shrine representative here today, Shrine Governor Lieutenant Colonel Neil Smith, to Mr. Dale Capron for his incredible support in making this commemoration a reality, to those who are descendants of the men of the 8th who are here today, to Mr. Bruce McLean and his mounted group, and finally to those of you who are here who simply wanted to come along and pay your respects to our young men, welcome. So, who were the men of the 8th Light Horse? Well, they came from all over Victoria, with a few from southern New South Wales and Tasmania. They hailed from Gippsland, the Wimmera, the Mallee and the Northern Country, and also here in Melbourne. And they came from all walks of life: drovers, solicitors, bank clerks, labourers and school teachers. But many were the sons of farmers, virtually born in the saddle, who learned to ride and shoot from a young age. These men were sportsmen. They were fit. They were tough. The best our state had to offer. ready-made soldiers, you might say. And together they'd be known to all thereafter in the AIF as the Old Eighth, and later on simply as Magar's Boys. For most of the originals, their last view of Australia was of Albany, WA, as their troop ships steamed away, heading to Egypt for training and some R&R, and then to war. Their future battles would be firstly in Turkey, then later elsewhere in the Middle East, where they'd fight with distinction at Romani, Gaza, and the long ride to Damascus. But it was at Gallipoli that the 8th was immortalised in the Battle of the Neck, one of the most infamous battles Australians fought in our most well-known theatre of war. For anyone who has seen the movie Gallipoli, you'd well remember the final scenes as the 10th Light Horse from Western Australia charged at the Turks, only to be mowed down in what was later described as a hurricane of lead. Many thousands of bullets per minute came at them in a battlefield that was just a narrow stretch of high ridge, not much bigger than a basketball court. These men from the West were the pride of their state, and so brave, as they knew what fate awaited them as they prepared to charge. As in the previous few minutes, they'd witnessed 2 waves of fellow light horsemen jump from the same trench, only to be shot down. These were our young men of the 8th, including my granduncle Reg in A Squadron. They were our ancestors who only hours before, on the morning of the 7th of August 1915, had been writing what were to be final letters to home, with some scribbling the names of their hometowns on their slouch hats or helmets before going into battle. Places that they were so proud of. Tatura, Warrnambool, Horsham, Kerrang, Longwood, Northcote, Deniliquin, Elstonwick, Echuca, Mansfield, Stratford, Ballarat and Balranald. There was 372 light horseman casualties on that tiny patch of ground from a battle that lasted just 15 minutes. If you go to Gallipoli, you won't find many graves of our boys from the 8th, as most were buried together after the war in a single grave. Their names, though, are honoured on the Lone Pine Memorial. For me, visiting Gallipoli some 25 years ago was both a sad but uplifting experience. Importantly, I left knowing that our young men were being well cared for by the people of Turkey at Anzac Cove. And since our initial commemoration, I received some heartwarming news that I'd like to share. My mother-in-law recently came to the shrine grounds with her sister and called me after finding this tree and plaque of the 8th. A message had been left by the plaque simply saying, "You have not been forgotten. You have not been forgotten." And so if we believe that our ancestors can live on in spirit, then the men of the 8th Light Horse Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel White's and Magar's boys, the farmers, the lawyers, the engineers, the school teachers and the drovers, they're still with us. And my message to them then is this: you are definitely not forgotten. We love you all, men of the 8th, lest we forget.
Clint, thank you so much. That hit the spot for me, and I'm sure for many people here. I could sense the fear, the bloodshed, the carnage, the aftermath of what those men in those first waves felt like and what they went through on that fateful day at the Neck. And you've put it all into excellent perspective, Clint. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it very, very much. Just a small aside, I noticed that we have present with us today a lady who was in the garb of an Australian Army Nursing Service nurse of the period of 1915, 1918. So it's lovely to have you with us, ma'am. To continue, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to that phase now of laying the wreaths. And I understand that we have 3 groups who are going to do that today. And I ask those groups to come forward when I call their names. First of all, we have a grandchild, the granddaughter of Lieutenant Colonel White, who was the early commanding officer of the 8th Light Horse Regiment, in Marjorie McPherson. Ma'am, if you'd come forward and lay your wreath on behalf of your grandfather and the rest of the men from the 8th Light Horse Regiment. And as I said, do be careful. Watch your head as you come through. I would next ask more descendants of the 8th Light Horse Regiment men, those who fell and those who have since passed on, to come forward. And those 2 people, I understand, are Pauline Richardson and also Mr. Jeff Pickard. Ma'am, sir, if you'd come forward and lay a wreath in memory of the Light Horsemen. I should add that so many of these people that are coming forward now, laying the wreaths, and others who are helping us today with this ceremony, have all been instrumental in ensuring that the 8th Light Horse Regiment lives on, not only on this occasion, but whenever we come here and we can see their new tree and the plaque. The 3rd wreath that I'm aware of is to be laid by Doris Garner, another descendant, and I understand your grandson, ma'am, Hugh, is that right? Please come forward. Doris Garner and Hugh. Watch out, Hugh, you're rather tall. Thank you to the wreath layers. Am I to understand there are no further wreaths to be laid today? That being the case, thank you to all the wreath layers. And in a moment, I'll ask another stalwart of the association, Mr. Brian Murray, to step forward, and he will recite the ode, which of course is done on occasions like this, and is a stanza from a poem written in 1914 by Lawrence Binion. When Brian Murray recites the ode, the last sentence of the ode, we will remember them. Please feel free. In fact, we encourage you to repeat that. And then there will be a period of silence, and towards the end of the silence, Brian Murray will read the phrase, "Lest we forget." Please do repeat that as well. Following that, there will be another, the 2nd and final bugle call, which is called the Rouse. And following that again, there will be the Australian National Anthem. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you, if you're comfortable to do so, for those of you who are sitting, please do stand for this more sombre, this more moving aspect of our service today. And I call now Mr. Brian Murray to step forward for the ode.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, all beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Shrine Guard, to your duties. Pull out. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Now, at this point, I would invite, hopefully most or all of you have a poppy in your hands. Follow my suit in a moment, please, and do lay them at this urn as a further token, a further sign of remembrance of the men of the 8th Light Horse Regiment. Please come forward.
It's so sunny today. It's beautiful. Do you like hot or cold weather? Medium? Yeah, medium's good. I'm with you. I like medium because you can dress up, you can rug up or